of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine. Right, quick, get the engine running in case she comes back. We have somehow survived the Dalek invasion of Earth. It will take humanity many, many decades to recover from what the Daleks have done to our beloved homeworld, but we've got to be off because of thing, and besides, there might be someone out there that needs rescuing. Let's find out, shall we? I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time and Space. This time out, we're going to be looking at The Rescue. So just to get you up to speed, I've got the blurb from the Target book by Iain Marter, and it goes like this. From his one previous visit, the Doctor remembers the inhabitants of the planet Dido as gentle, peace-loving people. But when he returns, things have changed dramatically. It seems that the Didoi have brutally massacred the crew of the crashed spaceliner Astra. Even now, they are threatening the lives of the sole survivors, Bennett, and the orphan girl Vicki. Why have the Didoi apparently turned against their peaceful natures? Can Bennett and Vicki survive until the rescue ship from Earth arrives? And who is the mysterious Coquillion? Well, let's find out, shall we? Let's go to a trailer, and when we come back, we'll be joined by our friend Dwayne.
Planet Dido to rescue ship. Planet Dido to rescue ship. Come in, please. Over.
Watch out for Coquillion. Where are you, my dear boy?
Iain. Keep away.
You destroyed a whole planet? You're insane.
Vicki! No, don't!
Doctor! They're pushing me towards the edge! Hold on!
And welcome back, and I'm very pleased to say we're joined by Dwayne Bunney from the Sirens of Audio podcast. Hi, Dwayne.
G'day, how you going? Nice to be here.
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's good to be a part of something televisual instead of audio for a change.
Yeah, because you are, for the uninitiated, you are the audiophile's audiophile.
Well, that's what I call myself, but we'll see if I can repeat it enough to make it a reality.
So if you haven't heard Dwayne's voice before, he is from a fantastic podcast called The Sirens of Audio, and they focus on the worlds of Big Finish, and it's a really great show. So if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you subscribe and listen, because it's really worth checking out. So before we get into what we're here to discuss, Iain, I think it's time for...
Oh, it's time for you know what. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, Dwayne, I have been authorised to use the Mind Probe.
Oh no, not the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
Oh, that's very authentic.
That was perfect.
He knows his 5 doctors.
Oh, God, that was good. That was better than I do it. That's embarrassing. Right, Dwayne, we have 5 simple questions for you this week. And actually, it's a lot more simple than usual because I couldn't really think of any clever ideas. So it's a fill in the blank quiz this week. I've got 5 clues. In each answer, there is one word blanked out. I want to know, what is the blank? Are you ready to play?
I am ready. My hand's on the buzzer.
Okay, great. I've never heard it called that before, but we'll go with it. Question 1. This is a song by the Rolling Stones, and it's called Emotional Blank. What is the blank?
Would it be Rescue?
Correct, for 1 point.
Oh, he's good.
We move on to question 2. It's a film choice. And the film is Free Willy 3, The Blank. What is the blank?
Now this could be a tough one, but I'm going to go with my second choice. That is The Rescue.
He's gone with The Rescue. The Rescue is correct for 2 points.
Oh,
2 for 2.
Question 3.
What is going on?
I can feel the pressure, and I'm not even the one facing the mind probe, so good luck to you, mate. Question 3. This is a song by the Irish God Botherists and tax evaders U2. It's called Love Blank Me. What is the blank?
Love the Fly Me? Is that right? Actually, can I change that? Let's go with Rescue.
It is Rescue. That's 3 for 3. Back to film now for question 4. A very tough one, this. You may not even have seen it, in fact. That's how tough it is. The 7 Dwarfs to the blank.
7 Dwarves to the blank. No, I haven't seen that one, but just in case, I'm going to go with 7 Dwarves to the rescue, perhaps?
He's done it again. I don't believe this. Okay, well that's 4, but you'll definitely not get this one. Final question. This is a song by Madonna. I want you to think about Madonna. The song is called Blank Me.
Oh, heck.
It's not what you're thinking.
It's not that one, Dwayne. That's absolute filth.
Okay. All right, I won't say that then. Would it be Rescue Me?
Oh, Mark, I'm sorry I've let you down. He's got 5 out of 5. He has passed
That is incredible.
the mind probe. Oh, big round of applause.
Dwayne, congratulations. You've won the quiz, 5 out of 5.
What do I win?
Well, you've avoided being tossed into the time lash.
Oh. I feel like I should have got one wrong now.
I mean, unless you wanted to be tossed into the time lash.
Well, who doesn't want to be tossed in the time lash? I mean, tossed into the time lash.
Well, Madonna was against it when I asked her, but, early days.
Oh, someone rescue me now. Where is this going?
Yeah, shall we move on?
Yeah, so anyway, guys, what story are we talking about this week?
The name escapes me. Is it? Oh no, it's The Rescue.
Hey,
that's the one. Okay, so we're now on to story 3 of season 2. So this is our introduction to the new companion. So we've had to say farewell to Susan. And I know, Iain, you are personally gutted about that.
Yeah, I'm really sad that she's gone.
And we get introduced to the new companion, who's called Vicki. I mean, she had numerous names in the writing of this story, including Tanny, which I'm not entirely sure about. And well, there were a few others as well, weren't there? And unusually, apart from the new companion, there's only really one major guest star, who's Ray Barrett, who is Bennett, who's an Australian, Dwayne, from your neck of the woods.
Absolutely. The Australians can carry whole episodes of Doctor Who on their own.
Yeah. I did a little bit of research on him, and he had done a fair bit of TV in the UK and Australia. He was probably best known for things like Emergency Ward 10 and The Troubleshooters, but he was also a voice actor So he did quite a lot of stuff for Jerry Anderson. So he was in Stingray, but is probably best known for his voices in Thunderbirds. He was John Tracy and the Hood, who's the bad guy in Thunderbirds. So he got around a bit.
Well, I never.
And another interesting fact about Emergency Ward 10, I think, was there was another Australian actor who was prominent in that, I think, Bud Tingwall, or he might have called himself Charles Tingwall at the time, but he played the dad in the first season of Catweasel. So he was a prominent Australian actor too, which I'm surprised he never got into Doctor Who. He may have left the UK in the 60s, but yeah, those...
Yeah, they did seem to have a pretty small pool of actors to choose from in the 60s, didn't they? Or it appears that way anyway.
Yeah, they did. An interesting thing about Ray Barrett was that he died in a place called Southport, which is the north end of the Gold Coast, where I lived for a few years. So he died only about half an hour from where I lived, which is...
Australia is massive.
Yeah, it is. It is quite massive. I can assure you of that.
Considering the number of people that live there.
Yeah, and being involved with the Doctor Who Club of Australia as well, I remember we tried to get Ray Barrett to appear at some conventions as well, and he was like Gay Waterhouse, who appeared in Invasion of Time. He was very resistant to having anything to do with Doctor Who fandom. I have no idea why, but we tried to approach him a few times to have something to make an appearance for the club, but he never agreed to do it, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame. So when did you first see The Rescue, Dwayne? What was your first experience of watching this? Would this be back in the 90s, or would it be more recent than that?
Oh no, it was back in the 90s. It was before it was released on video. I was around in fandom when all those VHS copies were flying all over the place.
Yeah.
But a copy had reached me from, I think there was a time in the early 90s when there was a station called BSB, was it? It was a satellite station.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's right, yeah.
And they were playing a few episodes. I think The Time Meddler, I saw that for the first time. And The Rescue was another one of those ones that had been cut specifically to be shown on that weekend. I think they had a Doctor Who weekend that John Nathan Turner was hosting, and The Rescue was one of those. So I always saw that version from there where the last few seconds was cut off, the cliffhanger where the TARDIS fell and sort of led into the Romans. They'd cut it off at the end there. So I'd seen it then. I can't remember what year that was. Must have been the early 90s, I'm sure.
I think that was 91, wasn't it, that weekend?
Oh, you got a good memory, Iain.
Well, I was talking about 1991 this morning, and remembering that I didn't have Sky, and it was quite tricky to not be part of that, because at the time that felt like the future of Doctor Who was going to be, repeats on satellite, which was better than nothing, but I didn't have access to it, so it all felt a bit sad, which is why I turned to The New Adventures, which also began in 91, nerd fans. Yeah, so Mark, when did you first see The Rescue?
Well, carrying on from Dwayne's story about BSB, they unfortunately kind of went down the pan because another Australian came into the fray, Mr. Murdoch, and launched Sky TV in the UK, and that pretty much did for BSB. So they had a channel called UK Gold, and they acquired the rights to show old Doctor Who, and I think I remember seeing it on that. So it would have been 90s, but I forget what year.
Wow. Okay.
What about yourself?
Is
this another one you're new to?
Yeah, about 10 o'clock this morning. I watched it. I was still in my pyjamas.
Nice.
You remember
it well?
Just got my post. I can remember it quite well. There's a couple of the more key areas that I'm a bit confused about now, and I've started to forget things. But I have notes. I have notes.
So first of all, I guess we ought to ask, what were your first impressions of Vicki?
My first impressions of Vicki were that it was a very refreshing change from Susan. I think I was pretty well sick of her by the end of the Dalek invasion of Earth, and she had a a final exit scene about as long as David Tennant's final episode. And I was not a fan of the Dalek invasion of Earth either. A lot of people rate that over the Daleks, the first Dalek story, but I prefer that over Dalek invasion of Earth. Possibly a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm a very audio focused viewer, so I like what I hear as well. And there was something about the incidental music in the Dalek invasion of Earth that I didn't like. It was very percussive, whereas the Daleks was much more electronic, weird. That I really enjoyed that a lot.
Of course, they reused the soundtrack from the Daleks for this serial, don't they?
Yep, you stole the mouth right out of my words. And yeah, so I really liked that, and I thought Kerquillian was pretty good, and the way they used that music to sting some of his appearances on screen was pretty cool. And I mean, it's not an overly complex story, but as an introduction story for the companion, which is pretty much all this was, it was pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is another David Whittaker story, and I think it's very rare that, from memory, he does a dud episode. He just seems to really understand how Doctor Who works and what works well in Doctor Who. And I think this really showcases what Maureen O'Brien can do. And also I think William Hartnell as well. I think this is an early chance for him to really shine and show off some of his range too. And I think he definitely, well, from my opinion, I think he definitely seems to come across as a more likeable character. And this is the start of that, which I think just gives an extra dimension to his performance. I don't know what you think, Iain.
Well, I suppose now that Susan's gone, he's no longer in loco parentis, so he doesn't maybe feel that kind of responsibility or pressure to safeguard her from the evils of the universe, and thus he is able to kick back a little, relax, have a little sleep when the TARDIS is landing, and sort of lark about in a more anarchic fashion.
I do like the scene where he wakes up. And Barbara says, "Oh, the trembling's stopped." And he said, "Oh, I'm so pleased for you."
Yes, that was that was
nice
laugh out loud.
touches.
That was so good. But we are getting slightly ahead of ourselves. Going back to Vicki, and it's you got to be careful here, because I don't want to be, too down on Carol Ann Ford's portrayal of Susan, because I believe she was doing exactly what was asked of her at every turn. But it was grating, and after sort of 10 stories, it was very clear that this was a one-note character, not necessarily a one-note performance, but it was a grating note, and it was a note that really got under everyone's skin.
I do feel a bit sorry for her, because it's, like you say, she can only work with what she's given.
Precisely.
Which is a shame. But
yeah, Vicki was, from the word go, calmer and dialed down a notch, less prone to shrieking panic at the drop of a hat, resourceful, strong, funny. Yes, I spent about 10 minutes thinking, was she the one that went on to be Morgaine in Battlefield? And then I realised that was Jean Marsh.
No.
So yes, I liked her very much, and yes, should we turn to the I'll stop everyone right now. My first problem with this story is the title of episode 1. Now, do either of you remember what episode 1 is called?
That'd be The Powerful Enemy, wouldn't it?
The Powerful Enemy, precisely. That's 6 points now you're on, by the way, Dwayne. Now, to me, The Powerful Enemy is something of a wishy-washy, lukewarm kind of episode title. Like, I don't know, The Competent Assassin, or The Robots of Tangible Irritation, or The Mild Peril of Fang Rock. Am I alone in this? I mean, surely all the enemies so far have been pretty damn powerful.
We haven't got to the quarks yet, but
No, but
we'll keep a powder dry on that one.
So far, they've all been pretty formidable, and it just felt really kind of is that where we've a powerful enemy? Oh dear. So and the TARDIS lands, and there we are in the console room with everyone. Iain, I notice, is there a branch of Marks and Spencer's in the TARDIS where he gets a new suit from every week?
Yeah, I think, look, there's nothing wrong with having standards, Iain. We've already addressed this before in previous episodes.
He looks
he's
like
a dapper gentleman.
He's not a dapper gentleman. He's the president of a lawn bowls association.
I just think you're jealous.
Well, that's for you to think and for me to dispute.
We should probably address the sand beast in the room while I remember, which is Barbara. Barbara, what were you thinking? She just gets really trigger happy. She picks up a gun, goes blasting left, right and centre. Poor Sandy, the vegetarian sand beast, gets blown away. And she's like something out of a Tarantino film.
It looked a lot like a vegetarian, you've got to admit.
Yeah. Be very careful, because I'm married to a vegetarian and she could be quite lethal.
It was one of the less well realised monsters in the canon. It looked very much like a sort of bored drama student in a leotard with a silly head. I mean, if I'm honest, it didn't look like a very powerful enemy.
It seemed like a bit of a combination of a seal and a anglerfish.
Don't forget, though, in about 12 years' time, they still use something very similar in a Tom Baker story called the Reboss Operation. The Shrivenzale looked almost the same.
Yeah, that was similarly terrible, wasn't it? And I suppose infinitely worse because they'd had sort of 12 years to think of something slightly better. But yes, so we're sort of leaping around. Should we just sort of cherry pick bits of the story to openly mock?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you here, Iain, because I love this story. I just think maybe it's the fact it's 2 episodes, so it's quite nice and easy to digest. You're not, having to hanker down for 6 or 7 episodes, and that's quite refreshing. But I just think it really moves along at a nice pace. I think Coquillian works as a creepy villain, and I like the sort of meta nature of, spoilers, the guy in a mask is a guy in a mask, because by this point you're trained to sort of, perhaps with modern eyes, accept that sometimes the costuming isn't quite as amazing as you might want it to be in the 21st century, so I think that works really nicely. And yeah, I love it. I think it's a great intro for a new character, and I think it's a highlight so far from season 2.
Did you like the 3-sided TARDIS, Mark?
I must admit I didn't really pay that much attention. No, I didn't.
When they walk out of the TARDIS, you can see through the back. There's no rear panel, so you can see what looks like a wall in the background.
I take it all back. It's the worst episode ever. That's just ridiculous. What were they thinking?
I couldn't notice. I didn't notice that, but I noticed you did see a lot more of the inside of the police box on this occasion than normal, and something did look a bit off. So I will have to go back and look at that again. So episode 1, I think was quite, it clipped along. It set everything up. You had obviously Iain and Barbara got separated. She was casually tossed off the side of a mountain by Coquillian, which I thought was a bit extreme. But then she gets rescued and ends up in the ship with Vicki. And then Iain and the Doctor spend sort of... and it was amazing. It didn't feel like 25 minutes. It felt like about 6 hours, just kind of blundering around in the dark with the world's biggest torch. I don't know where that came from. you sort of build up to, at the end of part 1, there was this fantastic cliffhanger, which I don't know if you used to watch those kind of 1940s cliffhanger serials like King of the Rocket Man or Zorro's Fighting Legion. They used to show them. They were brilliant. And it was that kind of cliffhanger. Iain is trapped between a bunch of skewers with another 4 or 6 blades slowly advancing towards him. He's going to be pushed down into the sandy creature of limited menace.
Now, I have a point to raise here.
Raise your point.
I must admit, I've got to be honest, this is not my own thought that struck me. We covered this story on the Nerdology UK podcast last year with Sucky from the Proctor Who podcast and Ben, who was on our show when we covered the Sensorites. And somebody brought up the fact that they make a big deal about how the people of Dido are this incredibly benevolent and peace-loving,
chilled out bunch of dudes, basically, like a bunch of old hippies. Yeah.
So when did they start installing massive blades into the wall and deadly traps for people?
Well, what I choose to read into it is that they were actually installed so that the sandy rubbish creatures could shave themselves effectively without getting up. A series of blades would emerge through the wall, and they could scrape their chins on it. No, you're right. It is nonsense that they've got this sort of Indiana Jones like chamber of terrible peril in the middle of this.
And you mentioned those Republic serials, and it must be said that quite a lot of those cliffhangers, the way they're resolved, is not necessarily that impressive compared to how the cliffhanger leaves you.
Yes,
So poor Iain is stuck there, about to fall off the edge of the cliff. He's in a really terrible situation. He can't escape these terrible, massive blades. And in the next episode, how does he get out of it?
Well, he
sidesteps.
Yeah, swings around a bit. What I thought was amazing was he's standing there and the blades are coming at his legs and he goes, oh, they're sharp. And the doctor says, stuff your jacket on them. Oh, that's not going to make much difference, is it, you silly old fool?
Well, it's not just any old jacket, it's a Marks and Spencer's jacket.
It doesn't really matter. He seems to have a new suit appear every episode, like you said. So
that's very true.
Pretty expendable.
I reckon he's got a machine in the TARDIS, like, twat at CNA or, Top Man or something, and it just knocks him out, some sort of git suit. Like, they've got the food machine with its 3 settings for fish fingers, milk or tea, and he's got a suit machine. But defend yourself with fabric and then sort of climb gingerly around the side of it and you'll be completely fine again. That was a very disappointing resolution to a genuinely, I thought, really good cliffhanger, which was very much, reminiscent of those 40s serials, as you suggest.
So thinking about that cliffhanger, the thing that got me was, if you're going to get pushed down to that sand beast, the most important thing would be to not go to the greengrocers beforehand, because being a vegetarian, the way to escape that monster is just to be there with nothing other than yourself, because it's not going to
just to be meat. Absolutely.
Yeah, just be meat.
If you had say some courgettes about your person or some cress,
you're in trouble.
Some celery. Yep. The monster would be immediately upon you, salivating.
That explains why Iain wanders around with that cucumber in his pocket.
Well, maybe that's why the Peter Davison doctor had the celery, because he was a bit more, come on then, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. Sand
Just
creature.
In case he happens to wind up on Dido again.
Well, he's obviously, it's a bit of a home from home. He's been there before. Here he is turning up again. So, Caquillian, first time I saw him, I thought it was Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees, just this ridiculous.
How dare you?
Well, she was quite hot, but a very different and very individual bit of costume design there. Now, which is a bit of a question for Dwayne, because when obviously, we kind of know you for your devotion to the Big Finish audios and so forth, and a lot of the fun of listening to those is doing 90% of the work yourself, in terms of you're doing the design, you're doing the costume, and so on. When you listen to things like that, do you sort of imagine everyone is always, wearing some kind of really good, sleek space costume, or do you ever think, yeah, maybe this guy's got pointy bits sticking out of his head and a weird, wrench with a shiny button on it? Do you ever just let yourself go in that 60s way and just imagine any kind of nonsense goes?
Absolutely, because when they do recreate 60s style adventures for Big Finish, well, they always do have a cover art as well, so which helps send you in the right direction. But
sure,
yeah, absolutely, I do.
Good man. I would. I don't. I haven't got that kind of money. So the first time we meet Bennett in the spaceship, which Mark, you were saying you thought the spaceship looked good.
I thought it was really well realised.
I think the interior looked excellent.
Yeah, well, that's Ray Cusick again.
Ah, is it? Oh, he's a little tinker,
I think he and Barry
isn't he?
Newbury really, when you consider the budget they had, I thought they both did a really great job for the serials, those early series.
I mean, the interior, I think, was far better than it really needed to be. It was a lot more detail than the camera would ever really have picked up on, so I wholeheartedly agree with you. The outside, I thought, was a bit ropey and looked like a sort of model on the wrong side of the studio, but I could be wrong.
I think Ray Cusick, in one of the interviews on the DVD, he was saying how Shawcraft, who would make their models at that time, were great at following instructions to the letter, but they weren't so good at sort of using their imagination to realise things, so he had to supply 2 drawings of the rocket, one of it in pristine condition in flight and another one of it in a sort of, crashed state.
Yeah.
So that they could realise it. I thought, for the budget of Tuppence Halfpenny, I thought it looked pretty damn good. But maybe I'm alone on that.
The satellite dish was cool. It reminded me of my Lego days.
It probably was made from Lego, but
So anyway, yeah. So inside the spaceship, if you will, the first time we meet Bennett, he came across as a very shifty man who was possibly hiding some sort of big secret, and I don't know if they were meant to sort of telegraph that quite so early on, but it was sort of achingly apparent what was, what the deal was from the first time he sort of raised that eyebrow and did that weird thing with his eye.
I think you're being very unfair, Iain.
Do you think I am?
I think he was just a very private person who likes to spend some alone time with his very high-quality hi-fi equipment.
Well, I can't argue with that. I've spent the entire day listening to the best of Suede on my new headphones. Oh, the bass. Oh,
very
the
nice.
drums. Oh, it's marvellous. But yeah, he just very instantly had this aura of I'm a bad man and I'm up to no good.
I think you're being a bit judgy there, Iain.
Well, that's not like
I think you're judging people on their appearances, and I like to try and rise above that kind of narrow-minded thinking.
Well,
or maybe I'm just a bit of a div.
Is that how you view all Australians, Iain?
Oh,
what, as sort of immediately
shifty
furtive and
types?
Shifty? No,
Yeah,
I was brought up on Neighbours, where Australians seemed like a very lovely bunch of very kind, relaxed, and very nice people, apart from Paul Robinson, who was just obsessed with getting money out of Mr. Udegawa.
Yeah.
No, this guy really reminded me of, who's the chap in Death to the Daleks, who I honestly can't remember his name now, but you think he's going to be a bad guy, but ultimately he's the hero. He just had
the Scottish fella.
He just had a little sort of hunched kind of powerful strength, which you maybe interpret as menacing, when it isn't, or the other way around in this case.
I'm trying to think who you mean now from Death of the Daleks. Did you mean the Scottish fella, or did you mean the little alien Bilal?
No, he was lovely. Oh, I totally have a man crush on him. No, the little guy with the stubble, who I want to say he blew up the saucer at the end with all the Daleks on it.
Yeah, he had a Scottish accent. So, in other words, anyone who's not English is a bit shifty to you.
Right. That's right. Okay, I'm gonna reach around.
We're going to be in so much trouble.
I'm going to reach around for something to try and counter this with, because I know that you associate all British people with Brexit and racism, but that's not the case. Some of us are nice. I just can't back that up with any facts. No, I think all Australians, apart from him, are not murderers. Apart from, obviously, statistically, some of them will be, but that's just science.
Well, you might be surprised because being from Tasmania, that's where all the English sent their convicts, is to my home state, Tasmania. Right. So we could well be murderers, but we're nice. We're nice these days. But I have to bring it up because we have to be hypersensitive about these things these days. Isn't that fashionable at the moment?
Absolutely.
Hypersensitive yeah.
Absolutely. The whole world is kind of falling apart on a knife edge at the moment, seems to me. But hey, let's not get political, because my dad will get cross. He always gets cross with me because I just keep ranting about Brexit the whole time. Anyway, one thing that did strike me, and I realise this is just because it was broadcast, 60 years ago. But when Iain and Barbara are gossiping outside the TARDIS, and Iain says he thinks the Doctor's getting a bit and I think he means old and possibly shaky and infirm, but he does this little weird hand gesture that nowadays you think is someone doing cerebral palsy, like Donald Trump did it. Did anyone else bump on that?
I actually did. I did pick up on that, but I didn't think cerebral palsy. I just thought, maybe a little bit crazy, something like that, which is still something I think that would be frowned upon these days. I don't think they get away with that these days.
Absolutely not, and they wouldn't do it, and I'm sure he wouldn't perform it in that way. But that's the kind of gesture when I was in the primary school. That was the impression that the bad kids would do, which I just thought, well, that's a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, it's a minor quibble. Another thing that I absolutely loved was in part 2, where the Doctor pops through to Bennett's room to have a little chat with him, and he opens the door and says, "Can I come in?" And Bennett says, "You can't come in." And the Doctor's immediate reaction is to look around for a battering ram and then start smashing his way. What if Bennett was just having a poo, right? And the Doctor's smashing down his walls, trying to get in, and what's going on? What did we make of that?
In the next scene, Vicki, the shot goes to Vicki, and you can still hear the Doctor in the background bashing on the wall. It's like, and Vicki's not reacting. It's like, that's normal. That's what everyone does when they can't get into a room. You go and get a battering ram and knock the door down.
Whacking off something,
banging away. Oh dear!
I just thought that was.
Now there's an image I didn't want. Thanks, guys.
Overreaction to someone saying you can't come in. If I'm, with the COVID queuing system, if I go to the pub and they're like, well, you can't come in just yet, we have to wait for a spare table, I don't immediately reach for a length of wood and start smashing the door down. Often.
No, you sanitise first.
Well, I think this story gives William Hartnell the chance to be properly badass. That scene, I know we're kind of skipping around a lot, but the scene where he confronts Kerquillian at the end, and he's in that quite atmospherically lit hall.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even turn to face him. He's just stood there looking like he's like a badass Time Lord who's going to tear him a new one. I think that's brilliant. I just think Hartnell was so good in this episode.
Yeah, he is. He's absolutely amazing. That's probably one of the standout parts for me in that one. I still remember that from the first time I saw it, and yeah, you're right. He just owns that scene. They're two really good actors too. Like Ray Barrett was a good character actor, and they're both sort of really performing their socks off. They're both taking it seriously, and it comes across really well.
Yeah, when you see the Doctor standing there, sort of in that, as you say, in that quite dramatic lighting, and he doesn't turn around, that I don't think you see the Doctor sort of often that kind of calm and poised, and you know, he's in charge and he knows what's happening. It's a very Seventh Doctor thing, and you don't see the Doctor behave like that again, I think, until 25 years later or whatever.
I could see Tom Baker behaving like that.
Well, he'd sort of...
Maybe that's just my bias for that era.
He'd turn around and sort of boggle his eyes a little bit at Kerquillian and go, "What a ghastly individual you are," or something like that. But yeah, it was wonderful, wasn't it? It was. You could almost have the music from one of the Batman films, just kind of gently scoring that as Hartnell stands there looking all kick-ass. That was great.
Oh, now see, I thought you were going for the whole Adam West vibe with zap and pow as they start having a go at each other with swords and all sorts.
Let's not dwell for too long on the so-called fight scene, because obviously do we know roughly how old Kerquillian, that actor, would have been? Because obviously Hartnell would have been, late 50s, so it was never going to be two young men wrestling on the floor like Chesterton and that guy in that other story.
I thought it had enough drama going on there, and then those creepy guys turn up in their tracksuits.
That's right, and I don't know where they came from, but by that point I wasn't really in any fit state to pass sober judgment on anything. I got one other thing that we've skipped over is when sort of early on in part 2, where they're sort of in the spaceship discussing the plot. They talk about Kerquillian, and Iain calls him cocky licking. Now, was that a little bit of Ian's sort of secret subtextual life coming out there, or what?
I'm not commenting on that.
I think that's what's known as transference.
Okay, and then I suppose we have to come to the elephant in the room, which is Bennett's plan. Doesn't really stand up to a moment's scrutiny, does it?
It is a bit... I mean, it's established quite early on that there's only one way in and out of his quarters. And at one point, Kerquillian goes in to speak to him, and then he comes out saying, "Oh, Kerquillian's gone." So you're thinking, okay.
And she doesn't...
Unless that's meant to be a pointer to 1960s viewers that all is not what it seems. I don't know.
Well, maybe they would only have sold that if sort of Vicki had then sort of turned to camera and looked a bit confused and said, "But he didn't come out." You know, it just felt really clumsy. And what, he's going to spend the rest of his life, is he, sort of pretending to be in bed?
It's very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, just popping on his big flowing robes like he's, I don't know, Elton John or something, or Cher, and then...
Well, I think his plan is once they get rescued, he'll just bugger off as soon as they land back on Earth again.
It just seems a very...
With the alibi that this Kerquillian character had killed everyone.
I think what worked really well, despite the flimsy storyline around Kerquillian, was the psychological aspect that he was using against Vicki. She'd already lost her mother, so she was on this voyage with her dad. So she'd lost her dad as well, and you could sort of see throughout her performance that she was drawing on that sort of quiet desperation of being an orphan. You know, she was, and I think Bennett was using that. If I want to delve into the story, he was using that quite well. So because she was so psychologically affected by becoming an orphan, losing her mum, her dad, being very young, then she would quite easily be manipulated by a plan as potentially as silly as what we're talking about here with Quillian. So, but I think that came out really nicely in the performance. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I totally agree.
I think she's a really sympathetic character. I think when you get the revelation at the end, I didn't end up thinking, oh God, well, she must have been some sort of idiot. I just felt so sorry for her because she'd been through this terrible trauma, and she really does get the chance. I'm sure Carol Ann Ford must have been sitting watching it thinking, why didn't I get a script like this? And she just gets to go through all that sort of gamut of emotions, and I just think it's a really good.
That's a very good point.
Introduction story.
In 2 episodes, in 50 minutes of screen time, she was given more to do as an actress than Carol Ann Ford was in a year.
Yeah, which is a bit of a shame for Ms. Ford.
Yeah, but no, you're right. Psychologically, if you can get past the obvious sort of logical flaws in the in Bennett's plan, then yes, as a psychological depiction of, I guess, Stockholm syndrome, where she's kind of, she doesn't necessarily know that he's the kidnapper or the baddie, but she becomes dependent on him, and thus he's able to manipulate her. And that was, on some level, that was quite nicely done.
So there was some really nice interaction between the main cast, except for Iain. He was the only one that didn't really interact with Vicki at all. So there was a beautiful scene between Vicki and Barbara when Barbara was forgiven for killing Sandy. I thought that was really nicely done. That was beautiful. We've also got the scene where the Doctor looks at Barbara and Iain, sends them out the door, and then he sort of beckons Vicki over and sits her down, says, "You didn't really mean that, did you? Did you?" It's really, really nicely done, and you're absolutely right.
Really shows off that caring side to his personality, doesn't it?
I do feel sorry for Carol Ann Ford. There was an opportunity, probably in Edge of Destruction, because they was just all set inside the TARDIS there, where they could have dwelt on Susan a bit more and drawn Susan as a character out a bit more, but that kind of opportunity was lost. But I thought it was really done nicely in this. So the beautiful, beautiful moments between Barbara and the Doctor really stood out to me.
Do we think maybe because they'd already, fumbled the ball with Susan in Edge of Destruction, which I agree with you was the perfect opportunity to expand her character, maybe that's what made it work this time around? They knew where they'd gone wrong with the last character, and they set this one up from the word go to be a much more rounded and, I don't want to say likeable, but do you know what I mean? Sort of less grating kind of performance.
Maureen O'Brien was putting her foot down right from the start of her time in Doctor Who, because they wanted her to dye her hair black to be more like Susan to start with, and she refused. Yeah. So maybe Maureen O'Brien was really putting her foot down right from the start, and making sure that she was having much more to say about her character and where it was going. I think Carol Ann Ford visited her on set during the rescue as well. So they would have, no doubt, Carol Ann and Maureen would have chatted about the limitations of that particular role, and I'm sure Maureen would have had a plan in place to kind of counter that. And Carol Ann probably had suggestions on what she could...
this was her first TV, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she'd been part of the Everyman Theatre group up in Liverpool, and this was her first big break in television. And you're right. They said to her, we were thinking maybe you should cut your hair shorter and dye it black. And she said, well, why don't you just get Carol Ann Ford back? Which, considering, she was pretty new to TV, I think that was
pretty
very
ballsy.
Good of her to stand up for herself like that. Because I imagine they probably just assumed she'd just, roll over and say, well, yeah, sure, whatever. But no, I think, I just find her so much more relatable. I suppose it's because of the fact that Susan is this weird sort of alien creature that just screeches "Grandfather" repeatedly and and twists her ankle on a semi-regular basis. It's hard to really kind of... I think her absolute peak of my interest in the character was Marco Polo, which sadly we don't really get to see her performance. We can only really hear it and see the photos, but I think she's great in that. But yeah, unfortunately, she didn't really get a fair rub of the green, whereas I think Maureen O'Brien, like you say, I think they've perhaps learned some of those mistakes and tried to come up with a different take on that character.
My peak of interest in the character of Susan was probably in the very first episode, An Unearthly Child. The stage was set for a
Wow.
really... Yeah, but the stage was set for a really interesting character it was genuinely an unearthly child. That's what it was called. And there was so many possibilities sketched out there in the opening episode to explore. It was touched on briefly in the Sensorites with the telepathic abilities and stuff like that. There was so much more potential, and we just got this really two-dimensional character in the end. I'm not surprised she wanted to leave. And I'm very happy that Maureen O'Brien sort of rose above that as much as she could in those circumstances. So, yeah, interesting that down the track, speaking of the name Vicki, when Sarah Jane came out of the TARDIS in Pyramids of Mars, or came out of the dressing room in Pyramids of Mars, dressed in that long white dress, the Doctor called her Vicki. And I remember thinking, that's not the Doctor never called Victoria Vicki, because he was referring to Victoria at the time. So interesting that we've had two characters with similar names, but in Pyramids of Mars it got mixed up. But that's a very delving into the minutiae of a fan's twisted mind that has nothing better to think about than these things. So sorry about that, guys.
That's what
you're
we
in
do.
good company,
Dwayne.
I think we ought to rate this and then maybe go to some listener feedback. So, marks out of 10. I am going to come to Dwayne first. What are you going to rate this one?
I'm a huge William Hartnell fan. I always rated him as one of my favourite Doctors, if not my favourite. And so this is a really, really good example of William Hartnell at coming towards his best in his role as the Doctor. So I'll give this an 8 out of 10.
It's a solid score. Iain?
So, and I hear what you're saying, Dwayne. It's the start of Hartnell warming up and becoming more of an impish, kind of magical figure. It's a little kind of flimsy two-part story that doesn't make a lot. It doesn't really stack up. It's kind of flimsy. It's got a great cliffhanger that's poorly realised. Ian's at tosser factor 5 in this, but I just can't mark it down because because of its many good points, and mainly it's the introduction of Vicki. So I can't give it any lower than an 8 either.
Good. I was worried there for a moment you were really going to mark it down. I just love this story. I think it's so entertaining. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a nice, short, compact piece, and it shows off just how good Hartnell can be. And for that reason, I am going to give it a 9.
Ooh.
So that's what we thought. But how about what you guys thought? Let's go to some listener feedback.
I've got mail.
Hi, this is Mark from the future. Yeah, I know, a bit wibbly-wobbly, isn't it? We've had some audio feedback from Ben in Indiana, so I'm going to drop it in here.
Everything I have to say about this story, The Rescue, can be found on episode number 37 of the Nerdology UK podcast. A great way to spend an afternoon.
And now back to where we were.
So we've heard from literally all four corners of Twitter. Firstly, our dear friends at the Crinoid podcast have said, The Rescue is a little gem. I didn't see the reveal coming on first watch. Oh, please. Coquillion is a great design. Oh, come. And Vicki...
No, he's right. It's great.
No, and Vicki is a breath of fresh air after the overwrought Susan, ensuring that the first change of personnel is a great success. Well, thank you, Jim. And that is pretty much, again, exactly what we said, but distilled into 140 characters, making us rather redundant. Ham-Fisted Bap Vendor, our dear friend Ham-Fisted Bap Vendor, said of The Rescue, he forever associated it with its UK Gold screening, an economical little drama that never wastes a word. That final confrontation is a masterclass in lighting and a set design that belies the meagre budget. Wonderful. You can't really argue with that.
With you 100% there.
Next, we've heard from our friend Hayden Gribble of the... I get confused now because everyone's in a podcast. He's in the...
Diddly Dum.
Of course he's Diddly Dum. I knew that. Oh, sorry, Hayden. He says, a nice breather after the Dalek invasion of Earth, and a softer Hartnell starts to come to the fore. So again, yep, brilliantly well observed, pithy, and wonderful. And then finally we got some chancer called the Sirens of Audio has tweeted in. So what this says: a true classic. The cast are wonderful. Hartnell is in fine form. O'Brien takes on the role of new companion with ease. That's a very good point. There are some beautiful shots and angles and a genuine twist. An easy and enjoyable watch. I think that's the... I absolutely take my hat off to whoever, whatever genius came up with that. I couldn't have put it better myself.
That was Philip. That was Philip, my co-host.
Hey, Philip. Okay, I've heard from the City of Jeff on Twitter @CityofJeff, and he says, "My time has come. Ha. My favourite Hartnell story for so many reasons. From the early scenes of the Doctor's apparent depression having left Susan behind, sleeping through the TARDIS landing, referring to her and drifting off into awkward, embarrassed silence, to him absolutely becoming the hero of his own show in that atmospheric and beautifully directed final confrontation. Hartnell never misses a beat with this one. The introduction of Vicki, whose chemistry with the Doctor is immediately apparent, and out Susan. There's something about a David Whittaker script that, for me at least, just absolutely captures the core elements and essence of what Doctor Who is and should be, and The Rescue is the perfect example of that. Oh, and reusing Carey's score from the Daleks is always a good idea. So thank you for that, Jeff. And Dwayne, I believe you've got some feedback too.
Now, considering our earlier discussion, I'm starting to get a little bit paranoid now because I know most of these comments are non-English people. So, starting off with Nathan Bottomley from Flight Through Entirety, he says, "It's tremendous. The monster turns out to be a man in a rubber suit." To which All of Time and Space replies, "Spoilers." To which Nathan Bottomley replies, "Imagine Warriors of the Deep with the same twist ending." And then an impersonation from All of Time and Space podcast. And you've misquoted Warriors of the Deep here. If only there could have been another way, and I'm sorry, but there should have been another way.
Ah, well.
I'm sure. All right, from Gallifrey's Most Wanted, we have amazing, a perfect introduction to a new companion. Such a simple story, makes me wish there were more good two-parters in the original run of the show. The regular cast is in there. Well, it says Grove, so I thought he might have been referring to Keeper of Traken, but I'm sure he means Groove. Vicki and Maureen O'Brien is a lovely addition to the show. Now, Andy Moore, I'm not sure where Andy's from, but it could be English. So he says, "The cast are marvellous in this, none more so than Hartnell, who really shines here. A great little story." And David Kitchen from the Doctor Who show says, "A personal favourite of mine, a wonderful character piece where Hartnell gets to show all his talent, funny, kind and especially strong in his confrontation with Bennett. Vicki is a wonderful character who gets the luxury of a perfect introduction, all about her."
Very well put. Excellent. Thank you all so much for your feedback. And if you want to get in touch, we'll be listing all the various ways over our end credits. So it just leaves us to thank Dwayne so much for coming on. Thank you, Dwayne. Do you want to give your show a quick plug before we have to go?
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you. You can catch the Sirens of Audio at sirensofaudio.com. That's our website. And if you just do a search on any of your podcast catches, you'll find us there. At the moment, we're coming out 4 times a month. So it's keeping me quite busy. I might take a break over December, January for a few weeks, but we'll see how we go. But quite a lot coming out at the moment.
Yeah, not wishing to make you too big-headed here, Dwayne, but it is quality as well as quantity. You had some great episodes out, some really interesting interviews as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been really fun and surprising the people we've been talking to. So it's been thrilling, actually.
Yeah, excellent. I'll put some links in the show notes so that if anyone's interested in checking it out, they'll just be able to click on it and get over to your website and listen. So thanks again for coming on and being our guest. So until next time, we'll just leave you teetering on a cliff edge until we come back to talk about the Romans. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.